I ordered a new double bed online, but forgot to select the assembly service. Accidentally, I sent the message to my ex-boyfriend. He came over without hesitation. After finishing the assembly, he suggested we test if the bed was sturdy enough. How do we test it? I asked innocently. The man pulled me onto his lap. Didn't you invite me over to try it out? Wearing a lacy nightgown and no slippers, I went to open the door. James appeared in the doorway, his gaze scrutinizing me. Is this how you greet your ex-boyfriend? I froze in shock. How did my ex-boyfriend end up coming? James and I had broken up about a year ago. I had sent the message to him by mistake. The air conditioning was on full blast, but assembling a double bed was still quite laborious. James was drenched in sweat. I inadvertently glanced at his back. His muscular build was visible through the sweat-soaked shirt, broad shoulders, and a slim waist. I took a sip of water and averted my gaze. My ex was indeed handsome, but I broke up with him because he was too boring. Not only was he always busy with work, but he was also unimaginative in bed. The same old rigid position every time. Lights off, not a word spoken. He wouldn't even let me call him Dr. James. It was just too dull. In the end, I couldn't take it anymore. I brought up breaking up right after we finished. James sat on the edge of the bed, buttoning up his shirt. He was silent for a while, not even turning to look at me. Are you serious? He finally asked. I am. 9 words. And that was it. We broke up. He was a man who was even dull when breaking up. It's all set up. James's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. He was quite handy. He had even made the bed. James sat on the bed, hands gripping the edge, and bounced up and down forcefully. The new double bed let out a series of suggestive creaks. He turned his head slightly, lips curling into a smile, and patted the spot beside him. Want to try it out? See if it's sturdy? Was this guy acting weird? I hesitantly sat down next to James. Like him, I bounced up and down on the bed, awkwardly trying it 3 or 4 times. James seemed to be staring at me. I was too embarrassed to look up. What was wrong with me? Testing the bed with my ex-boyfriend? How do we test it? I was about to stand up and ask him to leave. An arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me back. I fell backwards, landing on his slightly parted legs. His warm breath tickled my ear as he whispered, "Didn't you invite me over to try it out?" I hadn't misunderstood after all. James had really changed. He'd become quite flirtatious. Even now, I could feel an obvious change in him beneath me. My face turned bright red. You must have misunderstood. I broke this bed last night too. I had just sent the message to the wrong person. James wasn't really listening to me, just nuzzling my neck with the tip of his nose. You said once I finished assembling it, I could come sleep here. Does that mean you want to get back together? I was stunned. Get back together with him? If he hadn't suddenly shown up, I honestly hadn't considered it. But if you asked if I wanted to, well, I had just thought about it. James pulled my legs over, making me sit sideways on his lap. He lowered his head slightly, his cool lips landing on my forehead, then moving to my cheek, chin, and neck. I was dazed by his kisses, my fingers clutching his sleeves tightly. I had to admit, James's kissing skills had improved a lot. My phone on the side rang at the most inopportune moment. A message popped up on the screen. Sis, is the new bed set up? I'll come take a look. I won't be so rough tonight. With one arm around James and the other quickly replying to the message, I typed, "Not done yet, don't come. Don't ruin my good thing." I turned off my phone and realized this guy had stopped moving. James's brows were furrowed noticeably, his hands loosening their grip slightly. I was about to lean in to kiss him again. Who's that? He held my forehead back with 2 fingers. How did your bed break? I spread my hands, telling the truth. Just a guy friend. He was a bit too rough on the bed. That's how it ended up like this. The shower was running loudly. James had pushed me away earlier and gone to take a shower. He came out after a long while. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window on the balcony, wearing only a white towel around his waist, waiting for his clothes to dry. Are you leaving? I didn't understand his thinking anymore. Wasn't he about to do it with me earlier? James looked up coldly. What do you think? It seemed like he was angry, but who had offended him? I hesitated for a while, looking down at my phone. Then I'll transfer you some money. Thanks for your help today. Ryan's voice call came through. I answered casually. Okay, you can come over tonight. Yeah, it's all good. I hung up the phone. At some point, James had come to stand in front of me, staring at me strangely. What kind of person are you? What kind of person am I? I just finished assembling the bed, haven't even put my clothes on, and you're already asking someone else to come over? I glanced at the countdown timer on the dryer. It'll take him half an hour to get here. You'll be gone in 15 minutes max. You won't even cross paths. James stared at me intently, his lips pressed into a straight line as he snorted coldly. I understood then. Did he want to do something with me, but felt interrupted by an outsider? Or did he think I wasn't being proactive enough and ruined his mood? After all, James was quite conservative when it came to that stuff. His face darkened as he opened the door to leave, but suddenly stopped in his tracks. Ryan, who was about to knock, was visibly startled. Dr. James, what are you doing here? Ryan? James frowned. You two know each other? Sis, remember I just started my internship? Dr. James is my supervising doctor. James was a doctor. Ryan was a medical student. I hadn't thought about James being Ryan's supervisor. He turned back to look at me, then asked Ryan, "So, you live here with her?" "Yeah, it's close to the hospital and convenient for commuting." James's expression grew even more displeased. He used to live here with me too, before I kicked him out. Ryan looked back and forth between me and James. "Dr. James, what brings you here?" James maintained an odd silence. I answered for him. "Oh, he came to assemble the bed. It's all done now." James probably felt embarrassed and quickly fled. Ryan stood there bewildered. Did the professor accidentally take my slippers? That pair of men's dress shoes was neatly placed by the door. I wanted to contact James on social media, but he had blocked me. so I sent him some weird messages. Dr. James takes care of himself and leaves me hanging? What an asshole. Message sent. Sent successfully. I froze for a moment, then quickly tried to recall the message. He had unblocked me. I wonder if he saw it. I tentatively tested the waters. Just wanted to let you know, you left your shoes at my place. James's messages came flooding in. I saw it. I'm not coming over. Don't send me stuff like that late at night. Ryan had just finished showering and brought over some takeout crawfish, calling me out to eat a late night snack. I sent James a message. Got it. Ryan's calling me. Can't chat anymore. My hands were busy peeling crawfish, so I couldn't reply to messages. After finishing the snack, it was almost 11 p.m. I finally saw the message James had sent 2 hours ago. I'm an amateur. The bed was just assembled. It might not be safe. James really is a good teacher, so concerned about Ryan's well-being. I replied directly. Just saw your message. I'll tell him to be careful. It showed he was typing on the other end. He was typing for a really long time. I waited earnestly for his reply. To my surprise, James video called me instead. I was in the bathroom washing my hands at the sink. My face was reflected in the phone screen. My whole face was flushed red from the spicy food, and my lips were slightly swollen. I quickly turned off the water. James stared at me intently, his gaze extremely sharp with a hint of frost. He used you for 2 hours. Are you still up for it? Come out and meet me for round 2? I looked at the time. It was almost midnight. Go out for a late night snack with my ex-boyfriend? No thanks. I'm full. James leaned back in the armchair, running his fingers through his hair in frustration. Full? You're really something. Just using me as a tool. His phone seemed to be placed on the coffee table. The camera angle was tilted upwards, not capturing James's face. It only showed his strong thighs, pale wrists, slightly raised chin, and sharp Adam's apple. What a strange female gaze angle. As if I was kneeling in front of him. I didn't listen to a word he said, just silently took screenshots. Sis, who are you video chatting with? Ryan passed by the door, his gaze landing on my phone screen. It's nothing. I hung up guiltily. Living with a young guy, I had to maintain boundaries to avoid him getting any ideas about paying rent with his body. Ryan leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed, looking at me with interest. I saw you taking screenshots. Sis, you should find a real boyfriend instead of video chatting with thirst traps. I shook the water off my hands. He's not a thirst trap. He's your supervisor. Kids these days, so disrespectful. I just got caught by your student. I'm back in my room now. Still want a video chat? I lay on the bed texting Dr. James. Did you two argue because of me? Argue about what? You're overthinking it. He didn't even realize it was you. Oh, the conversation was abruptly cut off. No matter what messages I sent after that, James wouldn't reply. I glared at my phone in frustration. Half a month later, I went to the hospital for a checkup. My endocrine levels weren't great. The female doctor asked about my sexual activity frequency over the past 3 months. I helplessly held my head. I kissed someone 2 weeks ago. Does that count? Of course it didn't. She tactfully suggested that getting some sleep would help. Standing in the hospital elevator, I fell into deep thought. Who should I sleep with? The elevator doors slowly opened, and a large group of doctors poured in, squeezing me into the back corner. James stood at the front of the group of interns in his white coat, his expression serious and cold, exuding an impressive aura. Ryan was right behind him, yawning with his eyes closed. Compared to James's elite vibe, Ryan really didn't measure up. My gaze traveled over the crowd, landing on the man's superior profile. Wasn't this a case of the devil sending a pillow when I was feeling drowsy? Last time he seemed interested in me. I sent him a message. Dr. James, I got an appointment with you. James. But I'm not seeing patients today. I know. There's a special patient waiting outside your office. I had wanted to play this game with James for a long time. The door opened from the inside. James hurriedly pulled me into the room. How dare you come to the hospital to find me? What kind of question was that? I calmly sat down and glanced at him. Dr. James, always acting so sneaky. Do you have another girlfriend out there? James sat down in front of me, staring at me intently, and letting out a long sigh. What do you think? I'm already so infatuated with you that I've lost all sense of shame. He always seemed so reluctant. Whatever, I liked forcing him. I leaned forward, furrowing my brow slightly. Dr. James, I'm not feeling well. Can you examine me?